Throughout the Second World War, there were many acts of bravery which led to people being awarded some of the highest military honours their countries had. There was one man named Charles Upham, who won 2 Victoria Crosses, for example, for his skill on the battlefield and immense bravery under heavy fire. In the Red Army there were a number of Soviet women who fought alongside the men after heavy losses following the early parts of Operation Barbarossa. Many women were snipers and found themselves thrust into some of the deadliest battles in history, with them crawling through ruined buildings to take out the German enemy at places such as Stalingrad. But there was one woman who fought for the Red Army on the Stalingrad front, and she was a nurse who served in the 907th Rifle Regiment. However, in order to save others from their deaths at the hands of her enemies, she valiantly decided to take action, and she sacrificed herself in a brutal and bloody way, blowing up one of the conflict's most infamous tanks, and also herself. Join us today as we look at the story of Valeriya Gnarovskaya. And remember to support our channel. Please make sure to subscribe. Born on the 18th of October 1923 into a Russian family who lived in the region of Petrograd, Valeriya Gnarovskaya's humble beginnings would not necessarily foreshadow her heroic actions. Her father was a modest postmaster, and her mother was a housekeeper, but in 1924 the family then moved to the Leningrad region, and Valeriya attended primary school there. The family remained there, and following finishing secondary school, she joined the local Komsomol, the communist youth group. During the conflict, the Komsomol would play an important part in the Soviet war effort, as they performed many of the duties on the home front that were required. For example, working in agriculture to harvest crops and food. But following this, she then joined a mining institute. But as the Second World War broke out, it looked unlikely that Stalin and Hitler would ever find themselves fighting against each other. The Nazis signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact before, which, as well as agreeing how to divide Poland up, it stated that the two nations would not go to war with each other for some time. But this obviously was not upheld, as the Germans would storm into Soviet lands in July 1941, following the launching of Operation Barbarossa. The Red Army suffered initially very heavy defeats, and then Stalin would allow women to join the armed forces to fight against the Germans. But Valeriya's father was also drafted into the military following Barbarossa, and in September 1941, as the approaching Germans pushed on, it put Valeriya's homeland at the front line of the war. Leningrad and the districts surrounding it faced incredibly heavy fighting, and Valeriya's homeland was at the forefront of the conflict. The female members of her family, including herself, her mother, sister and grandmother, were then evacuated away to Omsk in Siberia, away from danger. They then travelled to another city. But Valeriya wanted to join up with the Soviet military, and she wanted to take up arms and fight alongside other soldiers to help defend her homeland. She and a number of other members of the Komsomol went to a recruiting station on the 10th of April 1942, and Valeriya had been rejected a number of times to join the military. But this time she was allowed to enrol in the 229th Infantry Division, and she was then sent to complete some training as a medic. But in July 1942, the unit she was part of was sent into the heart of the bloodiest and deadliest battle of the whole of the Second World War. She was sent to Stalingrad, and she was tasked with evacuating many wounded soldiers from the battlefield. She performed her duty very well, and constantly faced heavy fire while she was carrying the injured to safety. She was also armed with a weapon for close quarters combat and protection. On the 26th of July, enemy forces pushed through the Soviet line of defence and crossed the Cher River, but her unit continued to fight valiantly, and they managed to stop the Axis forces reaching a key railroad. But on the 31st of July, the unit then launched a counter-offensive against the enemy forces, and they forced them to retreat behind the river, as the Soviets were backed up by tanks and air support too. But the next part of the battle was constant, and for around 2 weeks there was non-stop fighting, and Valeriya was constantly forced day and night to carry the wounded back to the hospitals. But she did get typhoid fever and got very sick, and was carried to hospital by her fellow soldiers, and she was then forced to stay in hospital to recover. She almost succumbed to typhoid fever, but she did manage to recover, and she requested to be sent back to the front. She served on the 3rd Ukrainian Front, and during a huge and intense battle between the 15th and 22nd of August 1942, she managed to carry around 30 wounded soldiers to safety, even though she sustained a very bad concussion during this, but after recovering again she went back to the battlefield. The injury affected her hearing, and she lost her hearing partially because of this, but her actions on this specific battlefield saved dozens of lives. But then further fighting took place, with a battle erupting near the river of the Seversky Donets, and here she continued her rescuing. But amazingly during this she managed to carry 47 wounded soldiers and senior officers along with their weapons from the battlefield, and it's said she also managed to kill dozens of German soldiers. Valeriya during this battle personally killed 28 Germans in action, and it's believed through her time in service with the Red Army that she saved an estimated 338 wounded soldiers, which was miraculous as she was just a girl of around 18 or 19 when she did this. However, her final battle took place on the 23rd of September 1943, and she valiantly gave her life for the protection of others in a huge and bloody death in which she went out in a blaze of glory. Near to the village of Ivanenka, which was later named Gnarovskaya after her, she was serving as part of the 907th Rifle Regiment. She managed to evacuate the wounded from the front lines and take them to the hospital tent. It was also said during this battle that she managed to kill 47 soldiers during the engagement, but trouble was on the horizon. 2 German Tiger I tanks were spotted, and they broke through defensive lines, and they were heading straight for the medical station. But upon seeing the enemy tanks heading for the wounded, assumingly to take out the Soviet aid station killing nurses, doctors and wounded people, Valeriya decided to act. She grabbed a satchel which was filled with grenades, and then with them in her arm, she ran towards the tanks. Without a second's hesitation, she threw herself under one of the tanks, then detonated the grenades, which blew herself to pieces. However, the damage to the tank was colossal, as she managed to blow up one of the Tiger I tanks completely. Then the Soviet soldiers nearby, seeing this, managed to attack the other, which was distracted, and they overwhelmed it quickly, taking it out. So the 2 Tiger tanks have been stopped, at the cost of Valeriya Gnarovskaya's life, and with this heroic action she undoubtedly saved many more. The German attack was sent back, and the mission was a success for the Soviets. Following the battle, the villagers inside the settlement, hearing of her heroism, then went back to find parts of her body, and they gathered up what they could and then buried her. A year later she was given a full reburial with full military honours, and on the 3rd of June 1944 she was awarded the title of the Hero of the Soviet Union, and as mentioned the village where she died was renamed after her. In her service in the Red Army, she rescued hundreds of wounded soldiers so they could get treatment they needed, and ultimately she was just a teenage girl at the time. Valeriya was not fazed by the brutality of Stalingrad and the Eastern Front. She just wanted to rescue as many wounded people as she could, and she wanted to do her bit for Stalin's war effort. She was 19 when armed with a sack of grenades, and she ran towards a Tiger tank to save others, and her achievements during the Second World War saved many lives. But ultimately she was a brave and heroic girl who sacrificed herself to save others. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.